So there's a lot happening in the world, y'all. Um, as I record this, it is Tuesday, April 7th, 2026. And so much has happened since April 1st. And one of the things that let me say this. On April 1st, my company, Conscious Creations, released a product that is called Power Plant Moves. And I am looking for the bottle. I don't have the bottle in front of me. But it's on my website at www.consciouscreations.live. Now, how do I even start this? So, reality. What is reality? And who shapes and bends and writes the rules of reality? And those are some of the questions, right, that are being answered right now. Because, you see folks that are at war, that are, talking about the end of the world and the end of civilization and all of these things. And it's true. It's true. While there is an ending that is happening, those of you who know that the end, right, is but a new beginning. You understand? And so the clock is going from 12 to 13. That's what you're seeing happening in real time. And for those of you who know, you know. For those of you who don't know, let me explain to you. My name is Tisha Hillman, and I am a root worker, an oracle, an attorney, and a rich auntie. And I also have Rich Auntie available on my website at consciouscreations.live. 213, as I said that. So look at that, synchronicities. I love it. So, spell work, right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? Because you are a creator, you have the ability to create reality with your words. And then you take those words and you make those words into action. You turn those words into power, right? The words themselves are power, but then you add, right, the kinetic aspect of things, right, to bring it into reality. And that's that inner marriage, the inner union of the masculine and feminine polarities in order to bring forth creation. But understand what I mean when I say that. You existing as a being that has the ability to create, right? You have both of these energies, all of this energy, you have this within you. But there are beings that have known this, and they've gotten most of society to focus so much externally to trying to survive and to exist in a world, right, not made for them, that most people don't realize that they're not actually living in a reality of their own creation, but have also felt powerless to do anything in the face of it because people have been bullied and threatened and all sorts of things for not wanting to actually go along with the program. So I started to see these things unfolding in my own life. And so I started writing about it. So like I said, I am a root worker. I am an attorney, or an oracle. I am an attorney, right? And so I started seeing these things come up repeatedly in the practice of law. And those of you who know, it's, if you don't know, being a lawyer, being an attorney is all about words. When you look at society is held up with words, right? Those words have become architecture, if you may, because those words are a blueprint that someone then takes, and creates and brings that into fruition simply by using words. And so Um, Along this way, I started, like I said, writing these things down, and I wrote a book that is available on my website at www.thetishahillman.com. So it actually is being released in 2 covers. And what I'm going to show you all right now, this is how I manifest. But anyway, so this is the chapter 13 plan: spiritual recovery, reclamation, and reorganization of my divine birthright from a morally bankrupt system. Okay? So this book is going to be available. Well, it is available on my website. Like I said, what you will receive right now is only the excerpt. The book is with the printer. I anticipate that the book will be all printed out. I'll have actual physical copies of the book in my hand for you all to send to you on or before April 30th, 2026. Either way, it is released in 2 different covers. The second cover, this is the second cover, right? And on the back cover, it will tell you why 2 covers were chosen and what each represents. But for today, what I want to focus on is where we're going, or not even where we're going, where we are as in society, for those of you who know, those of you who are resonating with this. So what you are seeing is society that has been dominated by patriarchal forces. You are seeing an end to that, right? Now, does that mean that it's going to cease to exist? No. But what you are witnessing is the result of people awakening to this truth, taking back their power, and those who were masquerading in power that did not belong to them, they're crashing out because it was never their power to begin with. It was always yours, which is why they need you to give them your election. They need you to elect and to select this. You understand? So when you refuse to participate, that is when what I'm about to talk about starts to come into effect. And this is where we are with the chapter 13 plan. So this is a letter that I wrote that is appendix, I think this is appendix D, I think, in the book. I'm double checking for y'all. Yes, this is appendix D. Now, in this book, I talk about, like I said, the things that were happening in my own life that I started to notice and started to jot down as I started to break these linguistic spells and the linguistic architecture off of my own life, off of my own reality. And so I started to speak about it. Because one of the things that I've come to realize is that, like any bully, they need your silence. They need your acquiescence in order for them to continue doing what it is that they do. So if this is for you, then you understand. If this is not for you, then it's not for you. You don't have to leave your commentary. That's that, because I'm not here to argue with people. Like, that's not what we're doing. I wrote down what I was experiencing, because I knew that writing down what I was experiencing, I knew that it was not just my story, right? And so this is for those who this is your story, or you see yourself in it. You understand? Okay, so this is a letter that I wrote on May 31st, 2025. This is a letter that is, it was sent to counsel for the IRS, the Office of the Governor of the State of Maryland, the Maryland State Treasurer, the Maryland Department of Transportation, the U.S. Department of Education, and the Maryland Insurance Administration. And this was an intent to resolve a material dispute. And it goes, in the moral and social contract that you refer to as the Constitution, note that, as with all contracts, any ambiguity or uncertainty of meaning or intention shall be construed against the drafter. Although these words will offend some, I trust that those reading this have the emotional intelligence to work beyond any triggering you may experience, to allow yourself to bear witness to truth in motion. The intent of this writing is not to offend or to create conflict, but rather to resolve a material dispute, bringing clarity and wholeness in a space where there's been so much unnecessary pain and suffering. 161 years ago at the time, in the year 1864, the Maryland Constitution abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. In 1865, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution followed suit. As historically reported, on June 19, 1865, the last people in the United States being held as property through what has become known as chattel slavery were notified that they were now free. The people who were referred to as slaves were people who were taken against their will and forced to do things against their will that would create and build wealth for their quote unquote owners, with no compensation to them and with little to no regard for the person, except to the extent that they added value to the lives of those who were referred to as the quote unquote masters, holding power over the quote unquote slave. When people are viewed as something over which we have the right to lord over, possess, use, and enjoy for our own purposes, this creates a mental paradigm in which one person sees the other as property and not as a person. This allows one to easily turn a blind eye to the suffering of those who we see as the functional equivalent of of bank account digits or just numbers on your computer. In its traditional form, slavery is a system where individuals are quote unquote owned by others, considered property, and subjected to forced labor and deprivation of rights. Slave-based systems generally have a shared characteristic that involves using the energy or labor of another to enrich someone else, a group or entity, without adequate consideration, both legal and or otherwise, for the one whose energy or labor is being used. These patterns and practices have resulted in the unjust enrichment of entire groups of people for hundreds of years and continued until this day. Involuntary servitude is where a person is forced to work against their will through physical force, threats, or legal intimidation. The defining feature of involuntary servitude is a lack of free will. Knowing the same, all of you have pledged your allegiance to these patterns and practices that have allowed various forms of slavery and involuntary servitude to exist and perpetuate. The purpose of this correspondence is to bring you all together so I can address the people and or entities who believe and or operate as if they have a vested interest in my success while simultaneously doing nothing to assist me in acquiring said success, doing nothing to assist me in times of any perceived lack or need, but instead who have taken affirmative actions to penalize, punish, and deprive me of my divine right to live, exist, and create freely as a divine manifestation of the Creator herself. I began this communication with defining slavery and involuntary servitude so that you understand on a cellular level how the very system that you have pledged your allegiance to was designed and created to allow slavery and involuntary servitude to operate perpetually without most people ever recognizing this truth or otherwise believing they are in fact free. The drafters of your governing documents wrapped up the language of slavery and his children in word spells called taxes, fines, penalties, charges, surcharges, late fees, interest, mortgages, debt, and death rituals, and told the people it was now their legal and lawful. It was now legal, and told the people it was now legal and lawful to extract energy from people using these sources. And in some cases, they would be punished if they did not obey, regardless of the cost to the people or the person. As we know, your governing documents once made it legal and lawful to own other people, while the lawmakers, judges, officials, and law enforcement turned a blind eye to people who were being beaten, killed, wrongfully accused, and having all manner of atrocities committed against them. All of this was allowed to continue because having other people do the work while the so-called overseers collected the energy or currency from the people's work to build their own empires and wealth for themselves, their friends, their business partners, and their families was at the forefront. Humanity and decency took a back seat when money and politics took the wheel. And that became the governing quote unquote law that is now headed off a cliff. I say all these things to say that like a non-genetically modified seed growing in a garden, my growth, expansion, and fruitfulness requires what it requires. For my own growth, expansion, and fruitfulness, I can no longer allow you to deprive me of what I require. This elaborate system of debt slavery, carefully and strategically woven, crafted, maintained, and sustained by way of language arts, spell casting, and use of fear of punishment, penalty, and sanctions, is not sustainable. My story is an example of what happens when there is no more money left to take from someone and no more energy left to extract to sustain your narrative. You come face to face with truth. If this were a colony of bees, this is what is called a colony collapse. In a world that doesn't see the value in bees, but finds value in poisoning the very soil where your food grows, that reference may not be appreciated by all. Nevertheless, colony collapse, which interestingly enough can be caused by pesticides, happens when there is a loss of worker bees. This leads to the death of the queen and the hive. The debt-based system that operates your paradigm values money and perceived power, but the power is not real if you have to oppress, suppress, and depress others to obtain it, sustain it, or wield it. It is merely an elaborate illusion that has been cast over the masses using spell work by way of the word, and then using fear to hold on to the perception of power for the purpose of keeping the money flowing. The flow dried up for the debt-based paradigm. You may not know this yet fully, but you see it when you look out at the people. Many are struggling. Some are broke and broken. Many are angry, depressed, sick, tired, and sick and tired of being sick and tired, and no longer trust you to act in their best interest. People want to know why they work so hard, only to still find themselves struggling just to survive, but are being made to feel like something is wrong with them because they don't want to keep giving energy to a system that is robbing them and their posterity of any wealth they try to acquire, as they are trying to secure the blessings of liberty to themselves and their posterity. This is beyond politics, race, religion, and all the other boxes used to trap the light of truth into prisms of perception. This is truth in motion. The color of law is being used and has historically been used to justify amoral behavior and actions. Lest we forget, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Ephesians 6:12. Your system of law is but a system of rules and regulations that orders human activities and relations through systemic application of force by a politically organized society, or through social pressure backed by force. Using this operating system, the entities herein did take affirmative action to perpetuate slavery and involuntary servitude in violation of the 13th Amendment and the United States Constitution and the Maryland Constitution. Specifically, and using patterns and practices common to them, the entities herein knowingly attempted to make and keep Tisha S. Hillman, a person born free, captive in cycles of debt slavery with no viable means of escape. For context, since 2013, I was an entrepreneur, primarily a solo attorney, helping clients with various legal matters, but specifically custody, child support, and divorce. I held every position in my firm because most of the time I didn't have the financial flexibility to hire help. While working as a lawyer, I realized that business is booming when people are sad, depressed, separating assets, splitting up families, and fighting over child support. After being involved in a case where the lawyer's fees and expert fees exceeded $200,000, and paying it would mean these people would lose the very asset they were fighting over, I decided I could no longer practice family law in that way. That decision affected my finances. At some points, when I was trying to do more to balance my personal economy, I signed up to do, document review jobs in addition to my regular schedule. During this time, the entity commonly known as the Internal Revenue Service did, without a hearing, and after a hearing being requested, did seize my bank accounts. And despite having taxes taken out of paychecks bearing my name, this entity did seize my paychecks. The allegation by this entity is that Tisha S. Hillman, a person born free, had a debt obligation to the entity for unpaid taxes, and to pay said debt, regardless of how titled, property for Tisha S. Hillman has a primary vested interest in and possession of, whether actually or constructively, was seized to protect the interest. That the entity commonly known as the Internal Revenue Service has asserted claims over the property of a person otherwise born free. Within that same time, this entity placed a lien on the home I live in and work in accordance with the way real estate law has been set up. It is a common pattern and practice that such a lien would force me to give the lien amount of $53,897 to this entity without question and without a fair and reasonable opportunity to object to the same. The actions taken by the entity commonly known as the Internal Revenue Service were done against my will, without consideration, both actual and legal, and without regard if or how I would survive in these circumstances. These events led to the filing of a legal case in the U.S. tax court. And it goes on, y'all. This is a 8-page document, so I've read up to page 4 for you all. But the reason that I share this with you, one, is because it is in my book, so go to my website and make sure you order that. I will send you your signed copy. But secondarily, because what we are witnessing on a macro scale is also playing out in people's everyday lives on a micro scale. And so when we are witnessing, when we are literally witnessing the person who has been elected to govern the quote unquote free world crash out, and people, this is the system. This is what it looks like. But this is also what I was saying and what I've said in the chapter 13 plan. As parents, we teach our children not to become bullies. The reason that we do that is because we recognize the effect that bullying someone can have on them, as well as on the bully. But when it comes to adults, somehow all of that knowing goes out the window. And as adults, we're expected and looked at as if something is wrong with you if you want to protect yourself, right? If you want to protect yourself from someone putting you in a situation that you will be hungry and homeless, you're expected to accept that as normal. Not just normal, but you're expected to accept that as a protection of your liberties, right? This is what you're expected to believe is ensuring your welfare, even if you literally can't get welfare. Right? But what is happening is people are waking up to these illusions, and people are taking back their power. And those who are walking around in your power that you gave them, right? Most of the time we gave it to them, right? People are being called to take back their power, and that is what's happening. And so I wrote all about the ways and the things that, the things that I learned on my journey and taking back my power. And here's the thing, y'all, I'm not sitting here to tell you that any of this was easy, because you'll hear about, in my book, I wrote about sitting in my house and literally having no electricity for 3 months, right? Sitting in my house and having no water, having to go to the gym to take a shower, right? Having to go to 7-Eleven and buy ice in order to keep any food, preserved for me and my dog. Do you know what I mean? Like, I went through that for a period of months. I don't wish that on anyone, but that happened. That happened. And I wrote about that because I know that my story is not just my story. I know there are so many people out there who are trying to figure out. People, I see jokes about it all the time right now online about buying food, the price of gas, right? How all of these folks and their actions are impacting people's everyday lives, and somehow you're expected to work even harder. That is slavery. That is slavery by another name, but that does not stop it from being slavery, right? If you're doing it against your will, then whose will is it that is being done? If it's not your will, whose will is being done? And hear what I'm saying, right? I know Oreo has to go outside, but hear what I'm saying. You are witnessing the end of an era, right? Because as those of us who are the true guardians of this earth are stepping back into that awareness of our stewardship responsibilities and our stewardship roles to this earth, that is awakening that stewardship energy, right? And the planet. And those of us who are connected, those of you who are heart-centered beings, you feel what I'm saying. You feel what I'm saying. But there are those beings who do not have the ability, or who have chosen not to operate from a heart space, or operate from, right? They don't operate from love. They don't. I mean, you see that, right? But it is not normal to support giving your energy by way of work, by way of service, or by way of money and resources and energy to beings who openly support someone who literally will fuck the babies. That is not normal. That is not normal. And being asked to accept that is normal should tell you everything that you need to know. Yeah. So the chapter 13 plan, y'all, it's available on my website at www.thetishahillman.com. And please know, for those of you who have experienced financial struggles, who have dealt with foreclosure and bankruptcy, and who have dealt with substance abuse and all of these things as a result of having to exist in a world that was literally created to put you in that situation for someone else's benefit, this is for you. Take back your power. Take back your power. It's yours. It's your power. And so, I won't ramble, but if you do want a signed and autographed copy of the book, like I said, go ahead, order your book. We have several copies that are on the way to us from the printer. So order yours, secure your copy. We'll get it to you. Again, we have it in two covers. And it's whichever one, of course, calls to you, because I understand that they speak differently. Same inside substance, right? Like the same inside, but it will come to you in this cover or in this cover, and it will be available in both hardback and paperback. Now, I do want y'all to know, as of right now, though, I have decided to not actually put it on Amazon. So you will have to go directly to my website, and let me tell you why I'm doing that. Because where I am is, while I certainly want everyone to be able to access my book and get the book and all of these things, all of the different people that it's like what I'm talking about, right? All of these different folks that want to touch it, want to take from it, right? And then what ends up happening is the actual creator of the thing ends up with pennies. Ends up with pennies, because everyone who's touched it wants a part of it, right? And here's the thing, some of it is legitimate. I'm not saying it as if it's not legitimate, but there's some things that are illegitimate. Let me tell you something. I went to go make I don't know if I was sharing about, you know what? I was making a post about my book, and I was going to boost the post on Instagram. And it was, I think it was like, I was going to do like $100. And the next thing I know, Apple comes in and they like, oh, well, we're going to add another $30 on that. I'm like, for what the fuck y'all come from? Like, what you got to do with any of this? Right? So that's what I'm talking about. That's that shit I'm talking about. Apple, you hear what I said. You hear what I said, because that's fucked up. You had nothing to do with anything, but you want to insert yourself because you just want to, that's just what you want to do. But we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So you figure out, you know what? We're not doing that. That's it. So anyway, yeah. But if you're interested in working with me to help you to rewrite your internal constitution and your internal governance structure, go to my website, www.thetishahillman.com, where I go by the relationship oracle. Because since I decided that I'm not practicing law the way that I was before, what I'm doing now is just this. I'm helping people to remember who they are before the world told them who they needed them to be, right? So before the world told you who it needed you to be, who were you? And that's what I'm here to remind you of. So if that resonates with you, I look forward to working with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And if you've made it almost 34 minutes with me, oh, baby, we go together. All right. See you again soon.